Many years ago, I spoke with a pastor as we approached Easter time, and she was feeling particularly drained and was worried she was succumbing to depression. She was worried about Holy Week and how she was going to manage getting through it and preaching an Easter sermon. She said that she was worried she would come to the pulpit and say, "Christ is risen again." I think there's something honest in that, because we know the words, we know the story, we've stood, we've sung, we've proclaimed it year after year, and yet life has a way of continuing on. We go back to work, back to routines, back to the same conversations, the same patterns, the same struggles. And somewhere along the way, we begin to wonder, what if we know the words of new life, but we're still living the old one? And maybe that's why this story matters. Because after everything, after the empty tomb, after the appearances, after resurrection, Peter goes back. He says, "I'm going fishing," and the others say, "We'll go with you." And just like that, they return. Not symbolically, but literally. They go back to the water, back to the nets, back to the life they had before any of this began. And in fact, back to the life we saw in that first chapter of John when Jesus calls them from their fishing nets. It's a full circle moment. It's like maybe they felt the book of Jesus had closed and they were moving on to the next thing. And they work all night. They do what they've always done. They cast nets, they pull them in again and again and again, and they catch nothing. Empty nets. They go back to fishing, but it doesn't work for them anymore. And if we're honest, we know something about that. We do the same thing. After moments that are supposed to change everything, a wedding, a funeral, a graduation, a new job, a new beginning, life has this uncanny way of settling back to what it was before. Even the things that we don't want to repeat, we repeat. Even the patterns that don't give life anymore, we return to them. The same routines, the same reactions, the same ways of coping, the same ways of trying to make things work. And sometimes, quietly, without drama, the nets, they just come up empty. It's not because we've failed, but it's because there's something about that old way of living. It just doesn't hold anymore. And then the morning comes. John tells us that just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach. Of course, they didn't know that it was Jesus. He is there. And before they recognize him, before they understand what's happening, before anything changes, he is there. I'm reminded many years ago, back in Cleveland, I was playing the violin at a nursing home. We played a little bit of a recital for this full care facility. Most of the people that we were playing for were lying down. They were slumped in their chairs, their eyes closed. They were still, they were quiet. We were playing for a long time, and if I'm honest, I wondered if they heard it, if anything was happening for them. When we finished, one of the aides said, "Miss Gladys would like to sing." Very surprised, we said, "That's great." And then this woman from the middle of the room that we hadn't noticed, she'd been slumped over the whole time. She slowly stood up and she braced herself against the arms of her chair and she began to sing, "If I Can Help Somebody." It's an African American church song that is patterned after a speech of Martin Luther King Jr. If I can help somebody, then my living will not have been in vain. Suddenly, this place that we had thought was empty was full. And this woman that we thought was still, she was alive. She had been there for the whole time. We just didn't know. They didn't know it was Jesus. And then he speaks, "Cast the nets to the right side of the boat." And they do. It's the same lake. It's the same nets. It's the same work. And suddenly, there's abundance. So many fish that they can't even haul it in. Nothing looks different, and yet everything is different. And when they come ashore, they discover something even more surprising. There's already a fire, there's already fish, there's already bread. Before they succeed, before they arrive, before they understand, the meal is already there. And so this means that it's not about going back. This is not about picking up where they left off. This is not a resuscitation. Jesus wasn't resuscitated to resume the old life. This is a transformed life, a new life, a resurrection. Jesus isn't alive only again, he's alive and it's new. Resurrection doesn't take them back to the life they had. It meets them in that life, and then it begins something new. And maybe that's why they don't recognize him right away, because the new life that God is bringing into the world, it doesn't always look like the life we had before or the life that we expect. It shows up in ordinary places, in familiar routines, in lives that look from the outside exactly the same. And yet, something is happening. Maybe we've seen it. A conversation that goes differently than it used to. A moment when we don't react the same way. Something that once satisfied us, or something that was once good enough, something that we could live with, maybe it doesn't anymore. A small return of energy after a long stretch of exhaustion. Seeing someone differently, even though nothing about them has changed. Returning to the same place, but realizing that we aren't quite the same within it. Or maybe we find the courage we have been seeking to make a change. We might not even notice at first, but slowly, quietly, something is breaking in. Maybe the question isn't, what new life are we supposed to enter? Maybe the question is, where is this new life breaking in? Where have we not recognized it yet? Maybe we are even holding it back because we are scared of that change, of what lies on the other side of the hill. But at some point, we begin to realize that we're not just trying to fill our nets anymore. We're being drawn into something that's already underway, something already being given. And then there's Peter. Peter doesn't stop to think it through. He realizes, and then he moves. He's not ready. He isn't ready for this. The gospel, actually in another translation, it tells us that he's naked. He's not ready. He's not composed. He isn't even properly dressed. He throws on his clothes. He jumps into the water. In the Bible study, we thought that was a little odd that he puts on his clothes before he jumps in the water, but we'll work with it. And then he makes his way to Jesus. He's wet, he's half-dressed, he's a little unsure, and yet he's moving. He's moving toward that new life. Maybe that's what becoming new looks like. Not that we've figured it all out. Maybe we're not feeling ready. Maybe we're not knowing exactly what comes next. Just this. We realize that something is happening. And then there's that voice that is calling from the shore that the life that we went back to is not the same anymore. And then, like Peter, we find ourselves moving toward it. Not polished, not prepared, not put together, just going, just moving. Maybe we're wet. Maybe we're not quite ready. Maybe we're half dressed. And then somehow already becoming new. We find that there is fish and bread waiting for us on the lake shore, that Jesus has prepared a meal for us. Christ is risen. There is a new life. Christ is risen. Not again, but here. Amen.